Josh.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Schwartz, excuse me, and as the chairman of IAG, it's my pleasure to welcome you here today for the release of the National Survey of Age Discrimination in the Workplace report. In addition to being chairman of IAG, I suspect I'm one of IAG's older employees, which is probably the real reason that I'm here today doing this report. Although in reading the papers that were given to me, I was delighted to see that in Melbourne we have a senior caseworker, and senior is the key word, who's 86 years old and still dealing with claims. So it is a fabulous, it's just something that I noted and I thought was worth telling you about today. May I extend a special welcome to our distinguished guests, Federal Treasurer Joe Hockey, to Gillian Triggs, President of the Australian Human Rights Commission, and the Honourable Susan Ryan, Age and Disability Discrimination Commissioner. Welcome and thank you. Before we hear the results of the survey, I'd like, on behalf of IAG, to provide an acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the land we stand on today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present who have been the custodians of country and culture for thousands of years. I do this as a symbolic way for us to bring life to our commitment to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. As one of Australia's largest insurers, IAG recognises the value and contribution of older workers. We understand that to be a successful business, we need a high level of diversity. As an organisation, some years ago, we decided that our diversity focus should be on age, gender, and ethnicity. And there was a long list of things we could have chosen, but they were the three issues that we as an organisation do focus on. Looking at our 11,000 employees, 10% of those workers are 55 years and older. It again struck me that that percentage is probably a lot higher on the board of IAG. I'm not sure what that tells you about age and where it's recognised and where it's appreciated, but certainly the board has a lot older age profile. We know we need to do better. We are committed to retaining and promoting these valued workers, and our commitment does not end when our employees turn 65. When some time ago the government signalled that we may as a nation have to keep working until the age of 70, and despite workers' compensation legislation in most states leaving over 65 unprotected in the event of a workplace accident, we moved to provide our older workers protection by introducing personal injury insurance. This measure is one of a range of initiatives we've designed to promote an inclusive workplace for all ages and life stages. Aging is a privilege, and hopefully most of us will welcome that as the next stage of our lives at some stage, and we should always, I think, recognise that. So it is in our interest to better understand how we can be more inclusive and understanding. This is the first time that national data on this topic has been collected, and I look forward to the contribution of these findings will make towards our national dialogue on the benefits of providing for and retaining an ageing workforce. For those who don't know, immediately before Susan Ryan became our country's first Age and Disability Discrimination Commissioner, she was the independent chair of the IAG and NRMA superannuation plans. So we have a long relationship, and we're very pleased that we do. And for us, it's been an inspiration that with her new role, Susan's passion for diversity and the power of oldness, and I think that's your term, it's a delightful term, has been elevated to the national agenda, where she's now leading the charge to draw our attention to the incredible and very necessary contribution of our older workers and the benefits of intergenerational cooperation. And so with great pleasure, I now welcome the Honourable Susan Ryan to the stage to announce our country's first report into the prevalence of age discrimination in the workforce. Welcome, Susan.
Well, thank you, Brian, and good morning. Brian, I'll start by following in your footsteps and recognising that we meet on Aboriginal land the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and express my respects to the elders past and present. And note that we had hoped to have Auntie Donna Ingram here to do a welcome to country, but Donna is not well today, so we ourselves make that acknowledgement. And thank you very much, Brian, and to IAG for hosting this important event. And of course, I welcome the Treasurer, Joe Hockey, for being here with us today. Thanks, Joe, for joining us. Well, Brian, it is an honour and a pleasure to be back at IAG, where I was for some years part of the trustee body ensuring the security and growth of IAG's employee superannuation savings. So I was delighted when you accepted our suggestion that you might host this significant event here today. And I am aware of your company's long history of supporting employees to make the best contribution they can at all ages. And I was delighted to learn, just in the context of this event, that you have introduced a new product, providing personal insurance to make up for the gap in workers' compensation for employees over 65. It is a very significant gap. I've often drawn attention to it, and IAG is leading the way. So congratulations, and I hope that other companies, in the spirit of competition, will follow your example. So before I introduce you, Treasurer, and ask you to launch the report, I will make a few remarks about how we got to the point we're at today. This survey is published in the context of, and is very relevant to, the recently released intergenerational report. That fourth intergenerational report set out some massively significant predictions for Australians over the next 40 years. And I congratulate you, Treasurer, for publishing this important set of data. I've noted that not every commentator shares my positive response, but rising above the arguments about what wasn't included but shouldn't have been, or what wasn't included but should have been, is the crucial evidence, beyond argument and opinion, of population ageing. And the intergenerational report establishes beyond doubt that the longevity revolution is underway and is inexorable. The number of Australians aged 65 and over is projected to more than double by 2055, when there will be about 40,000 people aged 100 or more. Life expectancy continues to increase. In 2055, men will live on an average of 95 years and women over 96 years. Now, these projections demand a positive response from all of us, from individuals in the community, from our business leaders, and our policymakers, and especially from our political leaders. The predicted budgetary outcomes over the next 40 years, if policies continue as they are now, could indeed change our society for the worse. They could create unmanageable economic and social challenges, but they don't have to. If we pay attention and change some of the inputs, we could instead harness the opportunities the longevity revolution presents and improve the society for the well-being of all of us, which brings me to the report we're launching today. The strongest message from this prevalence survey is to point to a big and powerful change we could make to prepare for success instead of failure over the next 40 years, and it is this: to remove those barriers that prevent older Australians from participating in the workforce for several years longer than they do now. The national report measures and describes in new detail the most significant barrier to Australians enjoying a longer and more productive working life, and that is age discrimination. The discrimination is widespread and affects all kinds of Australians everywhere. It creates massive public revenue losses and public expenditure demands. It means lost opportunities for Australian businesses. And most importantly, from my perspective, it causes enormous human distress and undermines the enjoyment of basic human rights for too many of our fellow citizens. The negative effects ripple through the economy, as Brian has noted. The economic as much as the human rights case for addressing age discrimination is overwhelming. And it was to expand and deepen our understanding of the blight of age discrimination that I commissioned this new work. The survey was conducted for the Australian Human Rights Commission by Roy Morgan Research and provides extensive new data on age discrimination in Australia, how it is experienced and by whom. It explores how discrimination impacts on decisions about the employment of older people. It reveals the different impacts on men and women and investigates effects on city and country dwellers. It notes different impacts at different pay levels and points to the groups who are worst affected. The results are clear and they are disturbing. I urge you to look at all of the findings, but here are some headlines. First of all, the extent. Over a quarter of Australians aged 50 years and over, in fact 27%, report that they'd experienced age discrimination in the last 2 years. The impacts, what impact does this have? 80% of those who experienced age discrimination report negative impacts. How does it happen? When managers were asked if they factored age into their decision making, a third said they did. How do people react? When looking at the actions people took in response to discrimination, it found that many took no action at all. They did not expect a positive outcome and doubted that they would be believed or that anything could be done. Age discrimination is most commonly experienced when older people are out of a job and looking for paid work, rather when they're in a job or running a business. Nearly 58% of those who are out of jobs seeking paid work were experiencing age discrimination. Now, another important set of findings relates to skills and highlights the widespread negative perceptions about the skill levels of older workers. Of those who did not participate in the workforce in the last 2 years but who would have liked to, 1 in 5 reported that was because their skills were not current and this was their own assessment of their skills status. When we go to employers and colleagues, we find an even harsher assessment of the skills of older people. Negative perceptions of skills and the ability to learn new skills was registered by about 44% of the people we consulted. So I think these findings about skills send a strong signal that we must refocus and better target training opportunities for people at midlife. Most need to get new or different skills so that they can find work to take them through for another 20 years or so. New effective pathways to career change through retraining are fundamental. Another strong theme in the findings is the discriminatory culture that pervades our workplaces. As well as perceptions that older people were too old to learn new things, the most commonly experienced forms of age discrimination were related to limiting their employment options, limiting promotion, being refused training opportunities, and jokes and derogatory comments based on age. So it's urgent that we act to break down workplace cultures on age discrimination so that older people are not only retained but also hired should they find themselves looking for a job. With average life expectancies approaching 100 years in the foreseeable future, we need to realise that if people leave the workforce in their 50s due to discrimination, negative attitudes and the absence of pathways to retrain, they may have an additional 40 years or more without paid work. And I know, Treasurer, this worries you even more than it worries me. So a little bit more detail about the report. Over 2,000 telephone interviews were conducted across Australia in November and December last year. The highest instance of age discrimination was observed in the population aged between 55 and 64, just before the current age pension age. A substantial number of respondents who were employers and managers report that they regularly take an employee's age into consideration when making decisions about hiring, promoting and training. Age discrimination is occurring now. Nearly 3/4 of all of the most recent episodes of age discrimination occurred in the last 12 months. The groups most vulnerable to experience age discrimination are typically people who are in a lower income bracket or single parent households. And Treasurer, I don't have to remind you that they are the groups, if they can't find work, have to be supported on public benefits. Age discrimination has significant negative impacts on people who experience it, the most common negative impacts being on self-esteem and mental health, and I think we can understand that. The second most common effect was negative impacts on family, career and finances. 1/3 of people who experienced age discrimination gave up looking for work. Different people do experience age discrimination in different ways. Women are more likely to be perceived as having outdated skills, to be slow at learning new things, or more likely to perform unsatisfactorily in their job. So Liz Broderick, your work is still very relevant here. Women are also more likely than men to report the most recent episode of discrimination affected their self-esteem and mental health and caused stress. These results and all the other findings in the report add up to a call for action for government, employers, and all those who make decisions about the hiring, training and promotion of staff. As every one of us is ageing, as Brian noted, unfair age barriers can affect all of us. So it's a challenge for our entire society. But in publishing this research, I do want to do more than just raise awareness. I hope that this research will be the catalyst for business leaders and policymakers to tackle age discrimination in the workforce and liberate the economic potential of older Australians. And my first action step is to introduce the Commonwealth Treasurer, Jo Hockey, to launch the report. Very famous Australian. Minister Hockey has been a Member of Parliament for almost 20 years and was one of the youngest ministers in the history of the Commonwealth when he was made Minister for Financial Services and Regulation in 1998. He's not one of the youngest now, but that's what happens. Since then, he's had a number of very important ministerial roles: Minister for Small Business and Tourism, Human Services, Employment and Workplace Relations, Minister assisting the Prime Minister for the Public Service, and now, of course, most appropriately and importantly for our event today, Treasurer of the Commonwealth of Australia. Please join me in welcoming Jo Hockey.
Thank you, Susan. Right.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Susan. You know, I've known Susan Ryan for nearly 30 years. And that's because 30 years ago I was leading student protests against her when she was Education Minister of the Hawke government. So it has been a long, and I must say I have a great deal of respect for her during the course of that relationship. And the work she does as Age Discrimination Commissioner is hugely impressive, as is the work of the Human Rights Commission. And congratulations to you, Professor Triggs. And to Brian Schwartz, thank you so much for having us back here at IAG. The point Susan made about this report being closely linked to the intergenerational report is hugely important. Australia is one of the very few countries in the world that every 5 or 6 years looks forward 40 years in its endeavour to better understand the challenges that lie ahead. When Peter Costello launched the first intergenerational report back in 2002, Facebook hadn't been created. The world was a very different place. And whilst the numbers around budget pressures and so on change from report to report, the number that always is underestimated is longevity. And over the last few years, what we've seen is Australians are living longer than we expected, and thankfully living healthier than expected. And by the middle of this century, we will have life expectancy of around 100, which is pretty amazing. We'll be healthier and we will be wealthier. So that's incredibly positive. I mean, it's, you think about the history of humanity going back to, the elders of this land, how they could have expected to live to 100. And it is entirely feasible that somewhere in the world today, a child has been born that will live to 150. Entirely feasible. So at the spring meetings of the IMF and World Bank last week, there was a lot of discussion by finance ministers and central bank governors about the challenges of change, which is much of the theme of our intergenerational report. And for the first time, there was a discussion about demographic change. So when you hear the governor of the Bank of Japan talking about how Japan has to change to cope with its demographic movement, not only the fact that they have failed for so long to embrace women as equals in the workplace, but also their failure to properly embrace the ageing of their population. or the fact that China is facing the biggest demographic bubble in the history of humanity, directly as a result of the one-child policy. So there's one child to support two aging parents. And then you look at a country like India, which has a massive growth in the number of young people. And the question is, what sort of lives are they going to have? How are they going to be able to prepare for their future? The survey that is being released today, as I said to Susan Ryan a little earlier, states the bleeding obvious. And I'm sorry that it should be reduced to that, but for some in Australia, age discrimination is too prevalent. For some in Australia, it's not obvious. But from my perspective and the perspective of many people here, age discrimination is as reprehensible as racial discrimination as it is religious discrimination. So we need to somehow marry our own life experiences with the changing demographics of Australia. And I'm constantly looking for those little vignettes that illustrate the changing nature of Australia. And the other day I was taking my 3 children to the local public school, and every morning I say hello to Merv, the school crossing coordinator. That's the proper title, as he told me. School crossing coordinator. And Merv said to one of my children, age 5, said, "How old are you, Merv?" He said, "I'm 84. And my other child said, "How long have you been working?" He said, "Since I was 16. And my daughter, who's a smart one, said to me as we're crossing the road, "He's been at that school crossing since he was 16. I said, "No, I think he's had many careers." And I haven't found out what they are. But every Easter, Merv puts on the bunny ears. Every Christmas, he wears a Santa hat. The kids love him. He loves them. And he loves his job. And the wisdom he imparts in that brief discussion with parents and children is a reminder that we never grow old. We never grow old. It's an attitudinal thing in one sense, but the question is, do we ever change our attitudes? And we cannot. And I think that's the most empowering thing about embracing people of all ages and ensuring that we do not discriminate against people who are older. We're all going to get older, hopefully. Hopefully we're going to get older. And our lives are going to be very different. Very different. Technology is completely changing our lives. It's one of the great disruptors of our generation. New technology. And we can use new technology innovatively. So, for example, having in the United States, there is an app for pet carers. And this identifies people in your local neighbourhood who are prepared to mind your cat or dog over a weekend. And what's interesting about it is empowering people who are no longer active in the workforce to become active in their community. So there are a lot of retirees or people on the pension who are engaging with the community through this local, very basic app. And all of a sudden, they're earning a bit more income, they're getting to know their neighbours. It is re-engaging the community in a way that previous intermediaries could never do. Or the driverless car, I've talked about it on numerous occasions. But that, you know, my parents are in their 80s today. We're trying to get them to an Anzac Day ceremony. Having someone go over the house and help them into the car and the whole lot, it's a big event for them. The driverless car is going to completely transform aged care. It is going to completely transform the way we live. Everyone in 10, 20 years' time will have the capacity to have their own self-service public transport system. It's going to take the reliance out of ageing. These significant technology developments are transforming our world. And we as a government need to respond to that as well. And one area that we do need to respond is recognise that the retirement income system has been under different sorts of pressures since the innovation of the government that Susan was a part of, back in 1992 in particular, of setting up a compulsory superannuation scheme. And why? Because that retirement income system now interacts more directly with the age pension system, with the aged care system, with private health insurance, in fact, with commercial health insurance. I mean, commercial insurance more generally, or general insurance more generally. When I see advertising for cheaper car insurance for older people, I get a little jealous. I get a little jealous. And I think to myself, it's good that businesses are starting to target the market based on the specifics of that demographic. Government too needs to change policy to empower that specific demographic. We've got a way to go. We've got a way to go, and you've got to help us. You've got to identify the barriers for entry to work for older Australians. You've got to help us to identify the impediments for them remaining in the workforce. So coming back from Washington 2 days ago, one of the Qantas flight attendants came up to me and started telling me what impediments were there for her remaining in the job or accessing her superannuation or contributing to a superannuation. This is a conversation we need to have as a nation, and importantly, this survey is going to help us along the way. So well done to the Human Rights Commission for their work in this regard. Well done, Susan, for your indefatigable advocacy for equality of opportunity. And that's what it's about. In my mind, it's about equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. We want to have everyone have the same equality of opportunity to work, live with dignity, participate, to engage. And after that, it's their choice whether they want to stay there or not, whether they choose a different career or not. That's the outcome, is up to them. But we've got to make sure there are no barriers, no barriers. And it's going to be a collective effort. Government can't do it, standing on a pedestal in Canberra. No single business can do it. We all collectively need to work together to remove the barriers to a successful, long and healthy life. So thank you very much. Well done again. And I appreciate very much all of you coming along for the launch of this important report. Thanks.
I think we need to take some questions now. Well, thanks very much, Treasurer, and I don't think there can be any doubt that you at least get age discrimination. You are against it, and you get the fact that we are going to live longer and we want it to be positive. I think it's very heartening to those of us who work from an anti-discrimination perspective that the Treasurer of our nation actually understands what we're talking about, not only from the budgetary point of view, but from the human opportunities point of view. So thanks very much for giving us this recognition of the substance of what we're doing. Now, the Treasurer is available to take questions, as I am, if anyone would like to ask any questions at this stage. Yes.
Oh, hi, Yolanda Baker with the Australian Women's Chamber. Yolanda from the Australian Women's Chamber. Have we looked at the issues with public servants having to retire at 65? And is there a possibility that this will change in order to give them the option to remain if they wish to?
Well, I'm happy to report that for some time public servants have not had to retire at 65. There are very few compulsory retirement ages throughout the workforce, and they're not in the public service. They are in aspects of the military, and as the Attorney General George Brandis keeps reminding me, High Court judges and federal judges have to retire at 70. But generally, public servants don't. What has tended to happen is that under the old defined benefit superannuation scheme, public servants could maximise their retirement income if they retired at 55. So many did. But they don't have to, and more now we're seeing that they say, okay, I've got my super, but I still want to work. I still want the benefits of working. So I think the public service, I think, can be a bit of a leader in this respect. And Joe, I am talking to your Australian Public Service Commissioner about these issues too. Yes, Lisa.
Lisa Anise from the Diversity Council Australia. To what extent, we understand the prevalence of discrimination in this area, to what extent do we need to focus on changing mindsets, and how do we go about doing that?
Oh, Lisa, you're a bit of a diversity expert. I thought you'd be able to tell us. Absolutely. I mean, there are different things we can do, like make it easier for people to get retrained and so on and so forth. Your government, Joe, has a financial incentive for hiring people over 50. It needs more promotion. In fact, I'm happy to work with Minister Abetz doing that. But really, fundamentally, it is mindset. Now, there are a few 70s feminists in the room, I see, as 70s feminists are everywhere. And we had to work. We had to work at the beginning of the 1970s on how we changed a view that said you can't have a woman in any serious job. You can't have her promoted. She can't have maternity leave. When she gets married, she has to leave. I mean, we had to change that mindset. And look, it's taken a generation. And as my colleague Liz Broderick would attest, we're not there yet. So because there are of the demographic bulge. I mean, I said I got this job. Well, women were half the population, but ageing happens to everyone. So I think the weight of numbers and leadership by Brian Schwartz, leader of industry, leaders of government, pointing out all the time how we're wasting human capital, I think that is the way to the change of attitudes. But we're relying on diversity experts like yourself to get in there too. Professor Bradley.
Susan, I'm a member of the New South Wales Skills Board, and the thing that strikes me, I am just at this moment looking at a draft plan. I've got a meeting later today. And before that, I was the chair of the South Australian Training and Skills Commission. And it does seem to me that governments are failing to see reskilling as an area where there should be investment. So skills, training, government investment is going to initial people entering the workforce, but there's a lot of reluctance by governments to invest in reskilling, and I think particularly in workers over the age of 50. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, I understand what you're saying. You might be involved in these documents where we might change, and I'm certainly pleased that you drew attention to that exclusive focus on young people entering the workforce in the presence of the Treasurer, because I think we don't have to persuade you that if people get reskilled, 50 thereabouts, they can work for another 20 years. But it's right that most of our training, our vocational education bodies and so on, focus only on the transition from school to work, which of course is terrifically important. But I'm hoping we'll be able to get much more focus on reskilling, and Professor Bradley did use that I would investment for people in their mid-years. So thanks, Denise. Yes.
Hi, Alison Monroe from SageCo. The Department of Employment Corporate Champions Program is one of two federal government responses alongside Restart. And has actually been catalyst over the last 18 months for over 400 employers across Australia to take action, move from awareness to action in the space of engaging, retaining and employing mature age workers. Are there any plans, Minister Hockey, to divert perhaps funding from Restart into corporate champions, which of course creates the demand for Restart by igniting action amongst the employers of Australia?
Well, I don't know that there are any plans, but obviously there'll be some. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
I can't comment on specific plans, but I might have more to say about this issue on budget night.
Good.
Don't get too excited. But
Another question for the Treasurer, perhaps? Yep.
Thanks. Jared Thomas, the National Welfare Rights Network. We also see that there's some sort of positive and attitudes that are coming from job service providers. They really sort of say, well, there's really nothing that we can do for you. Why don't you do some volunteering and things like that? That works for some people, but people often get quite discouraged at that point. Do you see that there's a role for improving attitudes and some more monitoring and some engagement with that sector, because that's a real key entry at the moment.
You're right, and that's something that we have spoken about in Expenditure Review Committee with the relevant ministers about job service providers and whether the right incentives and rewards are in place for them to focus on particularly the harder cases. I'm sorry I refer to it in that way, but it can be the harder cases. The fact is, if you drop out of work when you're over 50, you're more likely to be out of work for a longer period of time than if you're under 50. I mean, and so what we've got to do is to work harder to help to get those people into work. I was really pleased to launch with Susan the Employers Toolkit for National Seniors recently at a Bunnings store, actually, which I'm never upset about visiting. And the fact is we've got to change employer attitudes. Restart is partly about changing employer attitudes, providing a financial incentive, but perhaps we can look at better ways to broaden that beyond it being about someone who has been on welfare for a reasonably lengthy period of time. Everything costs money, obviously, but it doesn't cost money to change attitudes in one sense, particularly the attitudes of employers and, in that case, job services providers.
Thanks, Joe. I think there's a question over here. Yes.
Treasurer Adele Horan from the Coming of Age blog. It's about Restart, and which some people might not know. It's a $10,000.
What is a coming of age?
It's my blog.
Oh, no, but I'm just wondering what age do you come of age?
Oh, 50.
Oh,
upwards,
I see. Okay.
right?
I'm just a few weeks away.
Well, you can subscribe. Won't cost you a penny. The Restart program, for those who don't know, was a $10,000 grant to employers to hire workers over 50.
Correct.
Why has there been such a low uptake of it? And have you got any other policies in it? That's the main policy at the moment.
Look, I think we didn't promote it enough, and we've been undertaking some marketing in that regard, and the numbers have picked up significantly in relation to Restart. The second thing is, it is about attitudinal change, particularly in the Treasury. I fully accept that. Treasury doesn't like to model second round effects. They model the cost, but they don't necessarily model the second round benefits to the economy or the second round benefits to individuals. This is one of the things we're working on at the moment, because it means that you are going to have longer term investments from government on the basis of further benefits down the track. And one of the things that we discussed at length in relation to Restart was, if we can get someone who is over the age of 50 off welfare and into work, then they're going to pay tax, and they're going to have usually a healthier lifestyle. And if they're paying tax and they have a healthier lifestyle, they're certainly not a greater cost burden to the Commonwealth or the budget. So therefore there is an economic benefit and there is a budgetary benefit in that. But they won't accept that. They just look at the costs of paying out Restart. They won't accept or offset it with some of the benefits that flow through over time. So if I can change those attitudes, which we're working on, then we can actually empower policymakers to have new initiatives that are longer term investments. Restart is something we are looking at, how we can make it a little bit more flexible and also ensure that we promote it more.
Thanks, Joe. I might just take, is there one more question?
The lady down the end there.
Thank you, yeah.
Morning. This is a personal question for Mr. Hockey. Why is the New Start benefit not kicking in until you've been out of work for 6 months? I ask this because I'm about to become out of work at the age of 60, and I don't think I can afford to be out of work for 6 months before an employer will hire me.
Well, there has always been a financial test associated with New Start, and part of it is linked to that, that there is a financial test. There has been obviously some debate about the application of a time period for younger people starting work. That obviously is not what you're referring to, but that's been the most contentious area in relation to New Start. And inevitably, because of financial challenges that all governments have faced, they've turned after someone loses their job, if they have the financial means, to rely on that financial means to help them get back into work before they turn to the public purse. Now, I know that sounds pretty harsh, but it's been pretty consistent policy for some years across government.
Thanks, Joe. And I mean, I could add, in the spirit of optimism that we seem to be embracing today, if our strategies for changing attitudes improve, then as you finish one job at 60, you will find another job, perhaps a part-time job to go to. So the question of going on to New Start, we hope for people who are leaving their jobs at old age might not arise. So look, thank you very much. Now to thank both IAG and the Treasurer, I invite the President of the Australian Human Rights Commission, Gillian Triggs, to do that. And I should acknowledge too that we have other commissioners here today, Commissioner Tim Wilson, Commissioner Megan Mitchell, Commissioner Liz Broderick, and anyone else? No. Anyway, a bevy of commissioners. But our leader, our President, will now thank our hosts and the Treasurer.
Thank you, Susan, and it's my very great pleasure and task at the end of this event to thank what I think is a dream team, the dream triumvirate. Our Treasurer, thank you very much, Mr. Hockey, but also, of course, to thank Mr. Schwartz from the Insurance Australia Group, and Susan. What this has demonstrated is just how important it is to have a political leader, to have a major business leader, as well as a leader with Susan's political background and experience working with the Australian Human Rights Commission. And that is what is so important about today, the joining of these three groups in the same objective. Firstly, Mr. Hockey, it's always wonderful to see a politician talk on these subjects, because you have that great skill of distilling the point. And that is this, what seemed somewhat hyperbolic at the time, that we were going to live to be 150, it's statistically or scientifically a possibility, but it woke us all up. We all heard it, and it got some attention. And that is, of course, the great skill, because it underpinned where we wanted to take this project. So thank you very much for bringing your leadership to this project and supporting it, because it's so important. Mr. Schwartz, thank you very much for hosting this event, for giving us these marvellous facilities. But you also help us to make the point that it is the business community that is going to be so absolutely vital in achieving the objectives that Susan is hoping to achieve with her research. We are, if I may say so, in a particularly informed position at the Australian Human Rights Commission to know about the importance of business and achieving human rights and anti-discrimination laws. And that is that, as many of you will know, we receive about 21,000 complaints and inquiries a year. And about 2/3 of those arise in the context of business or the delivery of goods and services. So to the extent that breaches of anti-discrimination law or human rights arise at all, they arise in the business environment. Therefore, it's the context in which these breaches arise, but also business is the solution. It's the leadership solution. And so working with you is absolutely vital to what we're doing. It's also, I'm very pleased to know that you have introduced in particular an insurance capacity to bridge that gap. It was something that Susan had identified and we were very concerned about for those post 65 to have some form of insurance. But of course, insurance plays such a vital role in the ability of people to stay in the workforce. Not only workers' comp, but also insurance for people with illnesses. HIV is a particularly difficult one that we come across in the Human Rights Commission. Sadly, I'm definitely in that group of coming of age, well over 50, and I'm becoming increasingly concerned about the ability to go on holiday occasionally with an insurance policy. Very difficult to get when you're over a certain age. So it comes down to that prosaic matters of business and finding the business case, which we know supports what you're doing. And of course, thank you, Susan. It's just such a privilege for us all at the Human Rights Commission to be working with Susan, the first woman to be appointed to a Labor cabinet. She brings huge experience of government, of working with Canberra, but working with the nation as a whole. But one of the critical things I wanted to mention about this report is that it's a statistically based piece of research. And at the Human Rights Commission, we cannot operate on the basis of anecdote or what we'd like to happen, or even, as I'm prone to do as an international lawyer, talk about provisions of international covenants. What matters very significantly in Australia is evidence-based research to underpin all of our work. And that's what this Prevalence survey does. It's very, very powerful, and it speaks powerfully to our political leaders and to our business leaders. Thank you all very much for being part of this today. We hope that this is the beginning of further work that Susan's going to do in relation to disability as well. We, of course, at the Commission come from a much wider perspective than age and disability. We deal with all sorts of questions of gender, race, and concerned about children. We work at a broad level, but I think the core point that I like to finish with is by saying work is not only a right, but a very great privilege. And it defines us as individuals at a personal level, but I think it also defines Australia as a nation. So thank you, Mr. Hockey, thank you, Mr. Schwartz, and thank you, Susan, for your work, and thank you all for coming. We look forward to engaging with you in large businesses and small to medium businesses as we work in the area of diversity and human rights. Thank you all very much.